Hey everyone, welcome to another episode, What's the Function? I'm your host, John Firth, and I'm once again joined with the wonderful Brian Dagan.
Oh, wonderful. I'll take it.
So this week, we've decided to talk about something that affects everyone, and it is device security. And more so, we're going to focus in on Microsoft Intune today.
Yep. So, a bit of history on me. Obviously, I started out in MSP space prior to this, and I was the manager of the RMM
Yes.
there, and we ran Kaseya. So that was our endpoint management at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Intune wasn't really, in my opinion, developed enough.
No, it was not back then. I mean, this was many years ago. Not many, but
Enough.
enough that Intune was like a spark back then. It was like it was barely cloud-based, I remember.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So why don't you explain what an RMM is? Because I think a lot of people might get confused because enterprises don't usually refer to it as an RMM. They might refer to it as, a ticketing system or, whatever they utilized it for.
Yep.
And RMMs can be, they can have a wide variety of actual abilities.
Yep. So RMM at its core is remote management and monitoring, or
Yes.
remote monitoring and management, one of those orders. But effectively, you have an agent that runs on your endpoint, and that agent is responsible for not only gathering the telemetry and logs and everything else for that endpoint, but performing functions on behalf of the administrator, like performing the necessary Windows and Office updates, or running scripts, or monitoring services, monitoring event logs to see if there's anything that would be of concern, surface it up. And then what you typically run into in this space is people will expand the RMM to do things like ticketing and billing and all sorts of other fun stuff too.
Project management. I've seen everything under the sun at this point with RMMs.
Yep. So Intune at its core is just an RMM. It is remote management and monitoring of your endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that all such that all of the endpoints are healthy.
Yes.
We're trying to make sure everybody is up to date on their software patches, that they're up to date on their Office patches, that we have a full inventory of any third-party software that might be running on that endpoint that could be vulnerable in some way, and performing tasks on our behalf as well. So if you need to roll out a different agent for remote control, for example, you can push that out through Intune. If you need to move people's user profiles around, there's anything you can script it, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can also shoot yourself in the foot pretty easily, but that's a learning lesson from experience in the RMM space, right?
Yeah, I think that with any of these rollouts or changes in technology, you have to assess what you want the tool to do in the first place. And Intune, for the longest time, didn't have a great way of doing a very common task, which is remote joining another machine. They would use, I remember originally they used like TeamViewer as an option, and then that went away, and they used to have a partnership with Jamf for Mac stuff, and then that's kind of gone away. So that's a core problem.
Yeah, wasn't there Jamf?
Yeah.
The dad jokes make a return in episode 2. They would leverage different remote control platforms. They obviously have their own now.
Yes.
Remote assistance as well as the one that's built into Intune. So from an end user perspective, either it's I go to a website and I put in a magic number, download an executable and run that, or because I already have the agent loaded, the Intune agent, I can remote in as a technician and help out.
And that's extra special for a lot of reasons. And you just touched on a big point about Intune. Most RMMs use agent-based. What is the special sauce in Intune that allows it to kind of act, as if it doesn't have an agent?
Yeah, I mean, there are still processes that run. So there's a bunch of background processes that check in with the Intune server and say, what do you need for me to do now, boss? But it's not reporting to any sort of third-party infrastructure or anything like that. It's going into Microsoft's data centers. And it's managed holistically as part of the entire endpoint management stack.
Yeah.
You get telemetry from it. You can tie conditional access policies to it based on the health of the endpoint that you're getting back from Intune. And it's a very powerful solution for the enterprise now. And it virtually eliminates the need for what would traditionally be considered an agent-based RMM tool provided by a third party.
Yeah. And I mean, as we've seen, there There's no perfect tool out there. Intune is still building. Microsoft is working, it seems, overtime to get some of these features out. Having the ability to now do Mac, Linux, and Windows for the remote help, as well as your standard Intune processes. And then most recently, the collaboration between Microsoft and Apple to be able to truly integrate Apple Business Manager with Intune was a godsend.
Yeah. The steps necessary to carry that out before, I think there were 3 cups of coffee just mandated throughout the list of steps.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, it could be a little flaky here and there.
It was bad before. I won't say. I mean, that's why they had partnered with Jamf. We knew that Mac management was always an issue, and you were choosing either Jamf or Adigy. And now we can just say, hey, Intune works, and we can deploy it on your machine. It's deployed right here, iPad OS, and it works great, and it has single sign-on, and a lot of the features that we really wanted on Mac. As an enterprise administrator, Macs and Linux, to a certain extent, they had better integration, but Macs were always this like bear for an IT staff. They always had to have a second application or a second management profile or something going on.
And an additional support person.
Exactly.
Mac, and it's a Mac. Okay, I'm going to walk away slowly now. And now it's a lot more manageable via Intune, via the standard configuration profiles that you would set out. They're, we're always striving for feature parity, right?
Yes, that's the goal.
We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when you're deploying these policies, you deploy it as an operating system specific policy. And what you would find in Intune in the old days, in the dark days, is that you wouldn't have as many options, or in some cases, you wouldn't have the option at all.
Yeah.
And now you can create configuration profiles, and you have a lot more settings that you can configure centrally without having to bring in that third-party management.
Another great feature, talking about centralized management, is the quick deployment of Defender to all of these endpoints. Yep. And the automatic, if you have already deployed SSO and you've already deployed Intune and you're using Intra ID and all of these other little pieces, which we would say is, part of just the standard Microsoft security stack. If you're using that, deploying Defender is like a couple clicks. It's not a huge push. I mean, I did just put a bunch of conditions in front of it. But if you're already utilizing Intune, pushing Defender becomes a much easier process. There's no group policy. There's no manual install. There's no sending an email to somebody. And I think a lot of those features are there if you want to deploy edge policies. That's becoming part of Intune now. Or if you want to deploy out certain policies surrounding Microsoft 365, the actual applications, that can all be easily pushed out to Mac or PC. Mm-hmm. And those are game changers. Like those are things that we would have to go in and build a custom configuration, hope that you got the XML right. If I think we talked about it on a different podcast, but one space off and the entire XML fails. And those were the moments that we would pull our hair out. And now it's like, do I want to deploy from the Windows Store? Yes, deploy from the Windows Store and boom. And then it just keeps the application up to date. You're not running third party. Yeah. That's the biggest thing here, is that we have a Windows PC that can now communicate fully with cloud services, and we don't have to rely on a third party for security or a third party for mobile device management or device management in general. You're not worried about a third party or back in the day, domain controller to sit there. Okay, that's all in Intra. We're really getting to a point where we've enabled an entire workforce to be fully mobile, and then you layer on something like autopilot, and then just drop ship it to their house. And then first time sign-in experience, or you can do a white glove experience, or work with your distributor to get a build onto a machine like Dell does.
And that's the sexiest option.
Yeah.
By far.
I mean, if you can get a build on the machine so that it comes in and it's already got the out-of-box experience configured for your organization, that's the best thing. They sign in one time. They set up MFA during their sign-in. I mean, it's all just a very smooth process. And I just want to say, it's awesome. It's so awesome coming from a world where it was like 1 million agents. It wasn't 1 million. It was like 3 to 4 agents on every single machine. And then on top of that, the entire infrastructure to support all of those agents that you were deploying, thousands if you're a company like ours.
And if it breaks, it breaks.
Mhm.
It's like, what functionality is down today because which agent is down
Yes.
today?
Yes.
Yep.
And that was always a huge problem.
Yep.
Um,
Well, on the Defender integration, I did want to mention one thing that I really do like is the Defender vulnerability management.
mhm.
So certain license tiers do get that, kind of the auditing, I guess you could call it. You get the inventory.
Mhm.
So, back in, because I know that's a bad word, I won't say it. Back in the traditional RMM space that I'm most familiar with, um, to update third-party software, I needed another utility.
Mhm.
I needed to
Night
quickly.
Night Chocolatey, one of the couple that are out there.
Yep, yep. And you'd inventory what was there. You'd determine what needed updated. You'd push the updates, and you'd cross your fingers. Um, there was really no information about what vulnerabilities are present in this old version. Is there an exploit for this vulnerability currently
Mhm.
out in the wild? And within Defender Vulnerability Management, that's all right there for you.
Yeah.
And it bubbles up into your secure score as well. So if you have an old vulnerable version of Chrome kicking around for a legacy web application that won't allow you to update it, well, that's flagged and surfaced as a risk to your organization to be running that old software because it requires that old browser.
And this ties into a lot of the other security features. I don't want to go too far into this, but things like cloud app security, being able to actually know what applications are out in your environment and block them if necessary.
Yeah.
Do you want Steam to run on your workstations? Probably not. Do you want a third-party cloud platform? So if you are an all Microsoft shop or an all Google shop or an all Box shop, there's a good chance you don't want people utilizing another service, because if they do, that's an easy point of exfiltration.
Yeah. And as a Box customer, for example, you could tie it in to your enterprise agreement, and using Cloud App Security, you could say, is this enterprise box usage or is this personal box usage?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's personal, don't allow that.
Yes.
It's intelligent enough to know the difference when you tie in to those enterprise providers. Obviously, box is box. There are better solutions out there, but if that's already where you've spent most of your time and money, we can at least inventory manage that data flowing in and out.
Yeah, we don't get all of the advanced features on third-party software that we get within the full Microsoft stack, but we do get a lot of them. And I feel like Microsoft has really positioned itself, or at least is posturing, to be more open, to allow other companies to come in and interact with their security services and not so much lock people into this walled garden, but allow items from outside to be kind of encapsulated in the walled garden or a part of that walled garden. Versus the typical like Apple method, which is like not Apple, not allowed.
Yeah. And administration has always been one of the harder aspects of it. I mean, back in the group policy days, you're talking about making registry changes. In your Office deployment example, you're talking not only the XML file, but if the option that you're trying to set isn't available to be set via the XML deployment, then you're going back in after the fact and editing the registry, etc. And what Microsoft is doing is really exciting because they're taking the complexity that is still inherent in the platform.
Yes.
You have base level ties into the operating system. You are changing registry values at the end of the day. But they're building layers on top of that now to say, okay, I'm the security administrator. I want to put in a security baseline through Intune, and I want to adjust the settings that Microsoft recommends that we set. Now, I won't get in too far into the baseline thing.
There's a lot to unpack in baselines.
Yeah. If you want to see something interesting, check out the Protect webinar where I go into why baselines are a good starting point. But you can kind of see where Microsoft's head is at. They want to get people to this common, secure starting point. And the best way to do that is with Intune, which is, depending on your license tier, already there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Business Premium, Microsoft 365, E3, or E5, you've got it. If you're in the nonprofit world, it's almost free, I think. So, it's, if you're not using it today, one, check your license to see if you are already paying for it. And if you're not already paying for it, then look at your infrastructure costs and do a simple return on investment and see, because I think that in a lot of cases, Intune is going to be much cheaper than buying a new server and setting up a domain controller and doing all of these legacy things that, if you're under, I don't know, 500 people, you probably don't need to. Heck, if you're over 500 people, you probably don't need to, but I'm not going to get into like corporate legacy infrastructure and tech debt. That's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah. Well, and you have to be introspective at some point. I've been in this field for a long time, and at some point people start guarding their fiefdoms. They
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, well, I manage OpenDNS and it works fine for me, and we know how to manage it. Oh, I manage Kaseya, LabTech, or
Whatever it
NetWise, or
is,
whatever it
yeah.
is." And it's very easy to fall into the trap of, "I need to do this. I know how to do this, and now I'm going to do it with the tool that I know."
Yeah.
So it can be painful for people to try to migrate to the modern management infrastructure that is Intune, but it's where Microsoft is absolutely focusing their efforts right now.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, Intra ID is the new singular identity.
Yep.
It barely looks. I actually, funny enough, I was doing some posting the other day, and I needed a logo for Active Directory domain services. I know this is a weird segue, but I need a logo, so I went looking for Active Directory domain services logo, and it used to have a logo back in the day because we'd have to Visio it out, and I was looking for it, and it didn't come up. And then the logo I did find was like from 2012 or 2016 maybe. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, they're not even updating the logo of what is known as probably in the enterprise and the business world, the most prolific product out there. Everybody has had Active Directory. Didn't matter if you hated Microsoft, you had Active Directory. So it's very interesting to see where they're starting to position themselves. And we talked about Intra and how it really works. And I'm excited to see more people on Intune, to see the management experience that people gain, whether it's for small and medium businesses or large organizations, to be able to manage their remote workforce. I think it's a huge gain.
And so, John, we've talked now about the identity leg of the stool, Entra. We've talked about the device leg of the stool,
yes,
with Intune. What's next?
Well, next time we're going to talk about content security, and that is a huge thing. So I don't know that we'll be able to cover it in one podcast. Yeah. We're probably going to have to take like 2 to 3.
We were going to have more microphones. It'll be kind of like group therapy.
Content security, as you know, not to dive into it, but it's a key pillar of any security and plan or SSP or anything like that. So please tune in, listen to next time, and we're excited to ask, what's the function?